dry over here.
Well, let's get to our guest, shall we? He's been sitting around doing nothing, waiting for us to start the show, and let's just get right to it. His name is Rick Shaffer, and the book is It's a New Track Record, Decade of Speed, Indy 62 to 72. What a great decade. I don't know how you came up with that, but talk about a decade of speed. Let's talk about a decade of change. You go from front engine to rear engine, and my God, everything really changed in that decade, Rick.
Well, actually, there's a story behind how I came up with this idea. It isn't my idea. My first book came out in 1999 on the first 20 years of the IndyCar series, and after I came out, a photographer friend of mine named Steve Stott, he said, "Hey, if you think you want to do another book, I got a great idea for you." And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, think of the years 62 to 72 and all the interesting cars, drivers, and teams that came through during that era." And I thought, that's a great idea. Well, unfortunately, Steve passed away in 2009, but I thought if I get this book written and get it published, I'm going to dedicate it to Steve. That's exactly what I've done.
Well, you know what? The first thing that comes to my mind when it comes to that decade, Andy Granatelli, the STP team. Remember that?
Yeah. He was actually in 62, he brought the Novi back for the first time since the 50s. And they didn't make the race that year, but that's where he started out with Novi's, and then he brings, he had the first successful Terman cars, and of course that Dayglow orange color they painted their cars. That was, they stood out. It was just, he was an incredible showman, and it was neat that he was a major part of this era. So,
well, I'll never forget the team colors, those white kind of jumpsuit things with STP stickers all over them.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody had the STP stickers on your toolbox and on your notebooks and binders everywhere.
They look like
this was a wearable.
They look like gas station attendants.
No, they based them on, actually, that was the kind of short sleeve coverall that the European teams were wearing, but they just put their logo all over it. Andy himself, he had a regular suit made with entirely covered.
Yeah, sure did.
So, So we understand how you got to write the book, but this isn't your first book, from what I understand.
Right, this is my fourth book on racing. So I after the current book, I got to co-author the autocourse history of the 500 with Donald Davidson, and then my most recent book was. I always thought it'd be neat to do a book just with nothing but nondescript stories that weren't widely known, because so many of the 500 books have the same stories over and over again, same photos. So then I had an outfit called Coastal 181 published 500 on the Indy 500, and then of course this new book is from these people from England, wonderful people named Evro Publishing Limited, and it was my first effort with them, so I've been very happy. They put out a beautiful product. I'd had some of their books before. I have a racing book collection of about 500 copies. So,
wow,
500 copies. So in other words, we'll all get one. And
well, there's been 500 different titles actually. So.
Oh, I see.
500 different books. Yeah,
that's my library. That's my research center. So.
Well, hey, we're always looking for a freebie. Hey, you're a media guy. You know about that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
As a matter of fact, a little bit of background on Rick. He used to work for a very well-known newspaper there in Indianapolis, and he was also part of an Indy team. Tell us about that, Rick.
Well, when I decided it was time to leave my newspaper career, I had a chance to be the public relations director for a team called Bettenhausen Motorsports, and this was run by Tony Bettenhausen. He was the youngest son of the same name driver who was, such a standout in the late 40s and 50s, and I worked 6 years with him, and 4 of the years my driver was an ex-Formula One driver named Stefan Johansson, who's now gone on to be the manager of people like Scott Dixon and Felix Rosenquist. And we had a year with a French-Canadian driver named Patrick Carpentier, and then my last year with the team, we had this wonderful Brazilian rookie named Castro Neves, and I always ask people, have you heard of this guy?
Yep.
But we formed a nice friendship from that, and when my previous book, he actually did the foreword. So naturally, when I did this next book, I had to get another full-time lawyer. So I was very blessed to have A.J. Foyt do that, and I told his publicist, I said, he's the only driver still living. It was in all those races that I cover in that book. So that kind of put the deal over the top, I think.
Well, I'll tell you, I had the opportunity to actually have lunch with him one time several years ago. And, once you take off the anger and the competitive thing that he's got going on, the aura around him.
That's his
He's
business.
really a nice guy.
Yeah, the thing about Mr. Foyt is how you approach him. And I, being a rather shy person, I decided the best way was to go through the publicist, and that seems to always work. Anytime I've dealt with him, he's just been, extremely, cordial and accommodating. And actually, I'll tell you a little story. I used to write for a now defunct magazine called Vintage Motorsport, and I was doing a story on the 64 500. And so naturally, I had to talk to him because he won the race. And we were at the Houston IndyCar race. And so he was finishing up breakfast. So I go on to his coach and I said, "Sure, you're finished? Yeah, come on back." And he said, "Do I know you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, AJ, I used to work for the Star with Robin Miller." And he goes, "Well, hell, we've been friends for 30 years and haven't we?" That just broke the ice. Had a wonderful interview with him. So.
Well, I was quite surprised, pleasantly surprised. Really a nice guy, and I thoroughly enjoyed the interview. So let's talk to you about your book. So 62 to 72, 10 years at the Indy 500, and what really surprised you that you would point out to anybody that reads your book? Hey, be sure and check this section out.
Well, actually, overall, if you look at 1962. There were still skeptics that thought it was impossible to go to 150 mile an hour until Parnelli Jones goes out and breaks the track record. And 2 years later, Bobby Marshman had a practice lap at 160, so they jumped 10 miles over what was supposedly impossible. By the end of my era, 72, they're nudging the 200 mile an hour market. I mean, it's just the thing was, it was just in those 11 races, you had the track record broken 9 times. So Tom Carney, of course, the track announcer, got to utter that famous "It's a new track record." And, it was just really quite an era for technology. You went from all front engine to rear engine cars by 1969. By 1970, every engine was turbocharged, and there were no limits. They were getting more than 1,000 horsepower, by the early 70s. And then the aerodynamics came into play. And, of course, with that, we also had slick tires for the first time. So, things like that. Just that's what really made this so special. It was just the different things that happened and the people, came and went.
So it makes me think of the question, what do you think of today's cars and today's technology? I mean, 240 miles an hour? Seriously? Somebody's going to get killed.
Well, interestingly, they've gotten safer as they've gotten faster. I know it doesn't sound like that'd be right, but, they've come up with a lot of ways. Probably the main thing that helped them safety-wise was when they went to the ground effects, they put the fuel tank behind the driver. So suddenly fire is no longer an issue that had once been. You see a fire in a car, it's usually the oil reserve tanks ignited. And, the materials, the carbon fiber is much better than the aluminum or than the honeycomb aluminum they use for the tubs. The helmets are better, the fire suits are better. And of course, the Speedway was the first to use this, what they call a safer barrier, which is a really, you wouldn't think that it's cushioning the effects when they're hitting the wall. It's not like they're hitting solid concrete, not, no give anyway. So, but they've had, and knock on wood, since 1982, they've had 3 fatalities of IndyCar drivers at the Speedway. So we're going on like a 23-year. The last guy that was killed was in a test. A promising rookie named Tony Renna had finished 7th the previous May. This was the fall of 2003, and they haven't had a fatality for an IndyCar driver since at Indianapolis anyway. And this track, there total like 43 drivers lost their lives there over the years. So,
who was the grumpiest driver that you ever interviewed?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think I was pretty lucky. I didn't really run into a lot of the question is when you talk to this person. I mean, my first autograph was Al Unser when he was a rookie, and I was a little 12-year-old kid, and he talked to my brother like we were important. And when I went to the Star and ready to do my first Al Unser feature, I was warned, and now listen, he doesn't see you as a fan like he did when you were a kid. So, he didn't like reporters. I think he got burned by a couple of people. So, it was not the fun interview I thought it was going to be. But really, I've been really lucky that I haven't had any set twos with drivers. I think I tried to be careful about when to approach them, and in the case of AJ Foyt, you're best served going some of them are better when you go through the publicist instead of just
Yes.
shoving a microphone in their face and a notebook bothering. So.
Right. Well, I find it fascinating. Tell me about the changes at the Speedway now that the boss has taken over that Speedway, and there have been quite a few changes.
Yeah, we're still in the early part of this. He was really kind of hampered because when he bought the track, then COVID came along. So I'm not really sure all the things he's going to do. Now, I'm 73 years old, and I last 5 years I've gone to the race, not as a journalist, but as a fan again. And my brother and I, we sit on the top row of what they call the Vista stands in turn 4. So that's 44 rows up. And this year they put handrails in the aisles. And boy, for us, that was a wonderful little thing. You would think would be a big deal. It's a big deal to your average fan. But, Roger Penske, of course, he's noted for his immaculate-looking cars and crew guides and transporters. So, the Speedway wasn't really decrepit when he bought it, but, you can just see he's really making extra strides to make it even more professional-looking facility. And I'm biased. I think it's the greatest racing track in the world. So.
I've been there a couple of times, and I have to tell you that thoroughly impressed. And I've been to a lot of racetracks around, but there's something extra special about Indy. And, it's a great, big, huge, long track. And if you're going to go pick a seat, well, good luck, because you're not going to see the entire track like so many are today, and that's the way that they're built. But when this thing was built, they didn't have all of the infield stuff going on like they do today to block the view.
Well, actually, they had a lot more trees in the infield than you think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the other thing was the grandstands were just single level, so it wasn't until after the war they put the double level grandstands on the front straightaway, and then of course the Vista stand I referred to, they're in all the turns now. They're a lot higher than the other ones ever had been. So, my top row is 44, and then some of them have an overhang with 2 more rows of seats.
Yeah, and they got a golf course.
So the track had to grow around the track, if you will, because the track, the race surface, is pretty much like it was, other than being fixed up and maintained. But it sounds like the track itself grew around that.
What happened actually was when they were planning the track, they wanted to build a 5-mile long circle, and so the property they bought after they hired the engineer after they bought the property, and they get him together and they show him a map that's got the property, and it was 328 acres of farmland, so it was flat, and they told him this is what they want. Well, the problem was the configuration of the property was a mile long going north to south, half-mile wide east to west. So it's like, do the math. Can you put a 5-mile circle inside a half-mile rectangle? Of course you can. So this engineer seized the moment because he could see these guys are ready to sell this property and start looking elsewhere. And he laid out a 3-mile rectangle. That's the thing. It's not an oval. It's a rectangle with 90-degree rounded corners. And it was a 3-mile track. That took up all the room. But then he realized he had not left any room for grandstands. And he said, you did say you're going to have races, right? And they said, yeah. He said, okay, I need to shorten the track by 1/2 mile because we need to put the grandstands on the outside of what would be the front straightaway. And that 1/2 mile will give me enough room to do that. And so that's why the track is shaped like it is. And of course, the grandstands, I don't think they envisioned having them almost all the way around the entire track now. Now, the golf course came around in the late 20s. And what was funny was they originally were going to build an infield road course, but Carl Fisher, the main driving force among the founders, decided let's make this an aviation automotive facility. So for a while, you actually had a runway that went diagonal between turns 1 and 3, and a large building inside of turn 2, which we call a hangar today. They call it aerodrome. It's the biggest in the world at the time. So, and all that got demolished when the great aviator Eddie Rickenbacker bought the track and puts in a golf course. So.
Well, a fascinating story. And listen, we could sit and talk to you for at least a day. and picking your brain about Indy and the Indy 500 and the cars, the drivers, all of that. But the new book, it's a new track record, 1962 to 72, an incredible decade of speed at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The author, Rick Shaffer. And we certainly appreciate the time that you've spent with us today, Rick, and we wish you the best of luck. And hey, call us anytime, because we can talk to you about the book all we want, but we also like a fellow journalist, and I know that you've got tons of stories to tell.
We could meet him at Indy next year.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll
That'd be
meet
great.
you there. You can buy us a
Yeah,
hot
we'll
dog.
give you a tour. So.
Okay, we'll look forward to that. Rick, thanks so much again. Before you leave, I did want to mention to you, this is a tabletop book. Father's Day is coming up. And as you mentioned off the air, Rick, that go to just Google the book or Rick's name, and I'm sure that there are probably a dozen different places that you can get the book, and it would be a great one to have to give away to Dad.
Well, thank you for the kind words. And can I say one quick thing before we leave?
Please do, yes.
Okay, you were mentioning a four-wheel steering car.
Yes.
Well, Mickey Thompson brought one to the Speedway in 1967, and there's a picture of it on page 153 of the book. So.
Well, there's my segment. Thanks.
Just
Just ruined that for me. No, I'm kidding.
All right, Rick. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate you, and best of luck to you in the future, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
sir.
Thank you. Hey, just ahead, Jeff's Car Culture, four-wheel steering, as we just mentioned. Mars has go-kart tracks around Houston, and his driving destinations feature all that and more coming up right after this break on the InWheelTime Car Talk Show.
The Tex-Mex dining experience is defined by Lupi Tortilla, your destination for Texas's best beef fajitas and frozen margaritas. Since 1983, Lupi Tortilla has served authentic and time-tested recipes made with the freshest ingredients. Atmosphere is part of the award-winning experience at Lupi Tortilla, all developed in a little house near Highway 6 and I-10 in Houston. Visit any of the Lupi Tortillas and you'll see the same attention to detail in each and every location. Start your Lupi experience with queso flammeado and guacamole, along with a classic frozen margarita. Dine on famous Lupi beef and chicken fajitas or pepper shrimp brochette, or a fish or vegetarian entree, and finish with a scrumptious flan for dessert. Find Lupi Tortilla in Houston, College Station, Beaumont, Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas-Fort Worth. There's a Texas location near you. The recipes are authentic and time-tested. The ingredients always fresh. Lupi Tortilla. Eats pretty good. Apple or Android, InWheelTime Podcast can be found everywhere, on the stream and through downloads. Whether you're on the road or at home and searching for a fun car talk show, give InWheelTime a try. Honest new car reviews, fun, informative interviews with real car people, weekly automotive news, features like Jeff's Car Culture, Mike's Driving Destinations, all on InWheelTime. Check us out on SiriusXM Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or while you're shopping on Amazon through Amazon Music. InWheelTime.com has a list, so check us out. That's it for this podcast episode of the InWheelTime Car Show. I'm Don Armstrong, inviting you to join us for our live show every Saturday morning, 8 to 11 a.m. Central on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and our InWheelTime.com website. Podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart Podcast, Podcast Addict, TuneIn, Pandora, and Amazon Music. Keep listening, and we'll see you soon.